listening to the Astral Hour. I'm your host, Astral Meadow. Join me as we take a glimpse into the mysterious. Welcome everyone. Today I'm joined with my friend Ani, short for Annapurnananda. She is a Kriya Yogi, spirit guide, nature spirit medicine healer, certified illuminated herbalist, and currently a student of Peruvian healing practices and ceremonial services. She works at Natural Alternatives Salon and Spa as the vision keeper and a leader for the community. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Astral. I'm super excited to be here.
Yes, thank you for coming out. It's wonderful to have you. Can you share a bit about yourself and your spiritual journey for us, and maybe get into a little bit about how you got your spiritual name?
Yeah, sure. So, I would describe myself currently as, a long time Kriya Yogi and Swami, which just means priest or priestess in that tradition. And currently being guided on the path of a medicine woman through an Andean medicine man named Puma Freddy Quispe Singona, and also through a brilliant herbalist, David Crow. My Kriya Yoga teacher was Goswami Kriyananda, and he was taught by Shelley, who was taught by Paramahansa Yogananda, and it just goes back that way, the lineage. So that's where I'm at right now.
Yeah, I love the reverence for the past teachers that share their wisdom through time like that.
So the name Swami Annapurnananda comes from a 2-year seminary program I did. It's a Kriya Yoga program with my teacher Kriyananda. He's my guru, and it's a pathway to learn how to guide others on the spiritual path. And at the end of it, you can either create your own name or be given a name, and I just let someone else, because I'm kind of cerebral sometimes. I'm like, I don't want to overthink this process. So I was given the title Annapurnananda, which means bliss through the nourishing fullness of the divine. And it's something like, after I was initiated and given the name, I remember walking out of the Temple of Kriya Yoga through the streets of Chicago and just saying it a million times, for one, because I was like, I don't know how to even get this out of my mouth.
Right.
It's a mouthful, hence Ani now. But, she was Annapurna is the second highest peak in the Himalayas. It is also the goddess of food and nourishment, which I thought a little ironic because I don't like cooking or preparing food. But over time, I've understood it to be this nourishment that comes from this deep connection to life as a whole.
Right.
And that's kind of where it's in. Yes, that is my bliss. That's my pathway.
That's beautiful. I love hearing people's spiritual names and sort of how they grow into it a little bit over time. It's like this, they're still discovering more power in their name as they evolve. And they're like, oh, this makes even more sense now that I've discovered this about me. So it's so beautiful. And I love hearing the backstories on that. So, what are some of the most inspiring experiences that you've had on the Kriya Yoga pathway? And could you explain a little bit about what Kriya Yoga is for us?
So Kriya Yoga, yoga is this pathway of taking one's fragmented sense of self and integrating those pieces in to a sense of wholeness or completeness, a sense of oneness. And Kriya, the word Kriya means to do, so it's any action, thought, word, deed done consciously. So it is a system of techniques and wisdom teachings that allow one step by step to become more and more conscious of life, the path that they're on, how they're walking, So in that process of becoming conscious, there's usually this beginning phase of purification, which I consider that's this healing phase, healing the physical, the mental, emotional, spiritual bodies. And in that process, just slowly gaining more and more awareness of the nature of reality and some of these bigger questions that we have of who am I, why am I here, where am I going. And so just very, very lucky to have found a spiritual master, because these are questions probably you as well, just like as children we even had a sense of these big questions, and not really being in a culture that could understand those and really speak to it on that mystical level. Yeah.
Yeah, I started doing Kundalini yoga in my early 20s, and I did find myself on sort of an awakening journey. And, like, you know, the more answers I would get, the more questions that I would have. And it was just such a beautiful unfoldment. And it just, you know, I would do some Kriya for 40 days, and I really would feel like different, like I had expanded. And then I was like ready for a whole new thing, you know, and it was just like I still haven't gotten to the end of that
Right.
quest. It's just a journey that's ongoing, but it's been so very beautiful and nourishing for me. So are there other, you know, cultures and stuff that do like types of Kriyas, or is it mostly just like an India kind of thing, or?
I think, yeah, and there's the word Kriya has always come up because I think that's the most, that's what people can relate to, especially in yoga and the Kundalini teaching. Like Kriyas are these actions that we take. And I like to differentiate a little bit from Kriya Yoga, which is an ancient wisdom tradition that's handed down orally. But to me, there's like only one path, and that there's just all these expressions of it. And you know, I know you've done a lot of studying, and I've done a lot of studying of all the kind of paths and traditions, and they've got their own language, they got their own flavors, their own feel, but they're really, even the mythologies, it's pretty well mapped out what that is from unconsciousness to consciousness.
Right. So we have different words to express similar things.
Yeah.
But it's kind of a universal thing. Like if you're seeking and you're doing these practices and you're consciously wanting to expand, then you'll find it, kind of thing.
And they all seem to have that common, you know, in the beginning, just kind of the like yama niyamas, kind of like the right action, the wrong actions to start evaluating and clearing up, and then the breath work, the asana, the body work to start getting the channels open, and then the deeper, you know, pulling the senses in and contemplating and meditating, and to reach this state of, you know, samadhi is a very beautiful word, but it's hard to get the mind around. And so I just try to say this sense of just balance, self-conscious awareness. I know who I am, and I stand in the center of that. You know, 51% of the time is, you know, considered enlightenment.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, we're always going to have those moments that come up. There's definitely times where I'm like, I don't know who I am. But luckily I have the records, I have my practice, and that helps me remember, you know, in those moments. So, how has working with nature and plant medicines supported your healing and awakening process?
So I think as a child, I was mostly left to my own devices. So it meant that I was outdoors always, in trees, talking to the robins, you know, specifically a dogwood tree. And, you know, I remember the rock formations I would play on, and how just eternal time seemed. So nature, I really felt like was my home, and my guide, and I almost like this loving mother. And then like coming into that school age and being taken out of nature and into a building, and what feels to me a lot like being institutionalized, and that being separated out from nature felt like being separated out from myself. And so coming out of that trauma, the first thing I wanted to turn to were like natural medicines to start to heal. Like, it was clear that I needed healing. And so, just dabbling with herbs and like homeopathy and like all that. I just felt like I was waking back up, just, planting a simple herb garden, lavender, rosemary. It's like, I don't know, it was starting this process of healing and awakening very early on. And then that kind of led me into meeting a Reiki teacher. She's local, Barbara Rose, and studying with her. And now there's this whole energetic side to, the plant and nature and life that I'm tapping into. And so I think they've just been there guiding me all along. And then I found Kriya Yoga and studied very, very intensely with my teacher, who passed away about 8 years ago. But just diving very, very deep into that system. And I didn't find it particularly nature-based, and I felt that it was more consciousness-based. So I felt like it was coming from this high esoteric kind of space. Although, thank God, my guru was deeply practical, and he was like, your earth life is your spiritual life. It's the same. And so I did a lot of cleaning up of my earth life, obviously. And then after he passed away, though I knew I had the knowledge and the wisdom, the techniques to kind of stay on the pathway, I felt a little bit disoriented by not having him physically present here, even though his words were always there and he was in my dreams. But I just felt lost and disoriented. And there was also this really, I kind of dive in and go really fast on spiritual learning. And so I'm like, I've got this aim of cosmic consciousness, and I'm going to go really, really fast. And I did that, and I kind of saw like the end, where it kind of all ends, this luminous void. And something about having that complete, and then having my guru leave the physical earth plane, it's like a spiritual crisis. It's like, well, what now? Like, this has been my whole life, my whole existence. I don't know where I'm at anymore. And I was studying Vajrayana Buddhism at the time, and met my companion, Sammy, and it was just beautiful. Him and his friends had been playing around, I think, with psychedelics, exploring psychedelics to have that kind of cosmic consciousness experience. And so there was just this one evening where we decided to take psilocybin, and I took about 5 grams. And something about that experience, like, I remember it was really cold, and it had rained, so it had frozen on all the branches of the trees, this ice. And I remember looking out the window and seeing this tree. It was close to spring, so it was already starting to bud, but now it's covered in ice. And I remember thinking, she needs this. Like, nature calls to herself what she needs, and kind of like this one more hardening off before spring is going to give her strength. And so, like, in that moment, it's like, I trust life, I trust nature. And I think that was a real initiation into working on deeper levels with nature and plant medicines. The master plants, which are, the psychedelics, but also your plants that are just growing around you every day. They have an essence and a spirit, and they're all like, what I see now, experiencing now, is just the medicines of Mother Earth, and they're all giving us some kind of message to help us heal and to awaken. And it seems like maybe really rapidly recently.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. I definitely feel super tuned into plants. That's something I learned through studying Steiner, because there's a lot of meditating with plants. So it's funny because a lot of us kind of do that naturally. We start gravitating towards them. And the more that I was hanging out with plants, the more I'm like, wow, they're so different. They're so different. even the ones that look similar, they might even be in a similar kind of family, they're still so unique
Very
from
unique.
each other. And it was just, I don't know, I didn't have a lot of like physical friends at the time I was meditating with plants, so I really did like they felt familiar to me. They were comforting me, not just eating them or consuming them, but like just being around plants. And I would just want to photograph them, and like, I don't know, it was like I was integrating wisdom, but it wasn't coming through words. But it was definitely like helping me evolve in some way, but it's like subtle. It's like a subtle wisdom. So it's
very, very subtle.
It's different than, having a guru or something like that. But I think it's kind of cool because at some point we can all access that even without a guru. Just being a child out in the country, if we're quiet enough and still enough, we're going to be able to start hearing that wisdom. And that's so beautiful that you've had that experience too. Nature does, I feel like, speak symbolically. Like you said, with like looking at the branch, this last spring, the daffodils started to bloom, and then the frost came and it just like wiped them out. And Spirit like gave me this message that was like, this is very similar. This was actually in comparison to what happened with my mother. They were like, this is what happened. The frost hit and she never got to bloom, and that was like the actual issue. And I was just like, whoa, and it was, I knew exactly when I looked at that flower, and got this message that this is like a visual of that this happens sometimes, but that too can be a natural process. And then there's going to be next year, right? There's going to be another season. So sometimes we might not get the pretty blooms.
Right.
And that's sad. Right. It's sad when, your peach blossom tree is not going to flourish, but it's going to be okay because the tree itself is still alive. And so there's always that opportunity for more growth in the next cycle. Yeah. So I feel like plants are also teaching us these cycles and this, I guess it's quicker than some of the cosmic cycles, because it's just like a year. But there's so much wisdom in just like observing a tree through each of the seasons. Right. And, there's these stories that unfold, and that's something I love about with Waldorf, which we were talking about, is that they incorporate that season so much into the, study for the kids, so that they're very much aware of these transitions. And there's all these cute little nature poems and things that help them be even more, like looking for that almost. Right. And so, yeah, nature is so beautiful in that way. And I love like that, you have the psilocybin experience, and it's like sacred even when it's not, like maybe that wasn't your intention, but as soon as you are like resonating with it, it becomes sacred. Right. I feel like.
Yeah, I was trying to think. We did a full ritual to set the intention for it, and I do think that my intention was always to get connected again deeply with nature and the way I was when I was a child, but now with more wisdom and more understanding.
I love that. And I feel like in our culture, sometimes people can abuse it.
Definitely.
It becomes just this recreational thing. But I feel like lately, people are like starting to really be drawn to it right now. And it's these people that have been doing like EMDR and all this. They've done all of the mental, psychological stuff, and now they're ready to like step into the transition. It's like they need that support from the plants at that point. So, I feel like if you've done all of the other stuff and you're ready for it, it can be so transformative and really like hold your hand as you sort of cross over that threshold. And now that's that merging, just like yoga. It's like merging you back into one, and it's such a blessing that we have that.
Yeah, I remember my Kriya Yoga teacher talking about that, like defining the word advidya, kind of the source of suffering for humans, which is often, I think, translated ignorance, but for him, it had more of the flavor of forgetfulness. And, all the kind of mischief we get ourselves into when we forget who we are and, where we came from, why we're here. And that's the beauty of these master spirit plants is there can just be this real quick seeing of the self, the true self and true essence. And then coming back from that, there's still this journey to walk to then integrate into it. But the plants, I think it's just so beautiful to at least have for a moment a sense, a feeling for it. So once the feeling is there, then it's easy to kind of align to and keep that as the guidance when walking towards it.
Right. It's like it creates this like core memory that you can come back to when you're feeling lost, because it's such a big experience that you'll never forget. It's like it's a life-changing point, you know. So
deeply healing to see the self again. Yeah.
Yes. Let's talk a little bit about your journey to Peru, where you were initiated into the master plant spirit of Ayahuasca and San Pedro.
So while I was studying illuminated herbalism with David Crow, he had a guest speaker, which was Puma, the Indian medicine man, and immediately had that, like, this is a teacher for me. And I took a class with him on ayahuasca and San Pedro, also in their tradition known as Apa Wachuma. And you know, Puma's this beautiful man of just like, he holds the lineage for his grandfather. He was struck by lightning at the age of 6, and that's usually how they know if you survive it that you're a healer in their tradition.
Yeah.
And so he has all the tradition behind him, but he's evolving in the sense that he just does not let any limitation come into the work. And so he's like, there's no reason why I can't teach you all to call in these plant spirits and program them into a glass of water and then drink them and then have them work with you. And I love that because I love subtle work. And so that was my first kind of initiation into these plant spirit medicines, working with them on a very subtle level. And, you know, ayahuasca is this plant that brings information of our cosmic origins. And then Apa Wachuma is this spirit that opens the heart. So if you have a memory of just like a moment when you're just blissfully in love with life, or that moment, or like the face of your newborn, like that's what that spirit brings, like where everything's just okay, you know, everything's okay, past, present, future, it's all okay, and I'm just happy. And so I felt myself, you know, going between those two just with programming water. And ayahuasca, it gives this cosmic kind of view of the self, but also will clear the pathways of whatever is still maybe stuck in there. So sometimes I'd just be going about my day, and all of a sudden, like, this enormous amount of grief would come that I had no idea was still in place there, and it would just wash through, and then beautifully right behind it would become Apa Wachuma with this, like, hey, everything's just okay, and I love life, and I'm happy. And so that was working with him on a very, very subtle level. And so then I traveled to Peru to study with him in person, and we had first the San Pedro ritual, and before that a clearing with a famous medicine woman there too, Mama Irena. So it was just all done within ceremony of just clearing energy. And I remember seeing my family constellation, you know, because those are tricky, and mine was tricky like most people's, and still currently, you know, a lot of drama in that constellation. And all of a sudden I just kind of saw us all with our arms around each other in a circle, just saying it's okay, none of it matters. It's good, we're good. And then after that, a few days later, we had the ayahuasca ceremony, and I remember just sitting there and seeing like a translucent strand of DNA come into the crown chakra and into the body, and it just felt like that true nature, that cosmic origin, like that place where I'm from, and the memories of that was being placed back in within my consciousness. And after that, it was just a beautiful experience of kind of talking with the stars and the universe about that.
Right. That's beautiful. I really never thought about using ayahuasca as like essence, but that is so beautiful to think about, because I've been, nervous, like to even for whatever reason. It's probably like bad LSD flashbacks where I'm like, I don't know if I want to lose myself. But I think essence would be good for me, and if there was any fear, it could help me work through it that way without just blasting me. Because I'm so sensitive to everything. Like homeopathy works wonders. And I've noticed lately that if I just take the time to find the remedy that matches, it just goes, I haven't even taken it. And I'm like, well, now my headache's gone. That's weird. But it's like shifting through all of the energies and finding the one. And then most of the time, by the time I've discovered the essence or energy, I'm like, okay, well, now I'm good.
Right.
So I think I could do it that way, but that's so cool. I don't know why no one's ever talked about it, because they always, it's you have to take a certain amount or whatever. And I think that's where I'm nervous, because I'm like, well, I'm so sensitive. I feel like I'll just be vomiting for a while. And like, that's great. Like if you have people holding you, in a ceremony, but we don't have that in the States really. So it's not really supported, but I feel like essence is probably great, honestly. So I'm going to have to look into that. But
that's one of the things I like about Puma is those are the two like big ahas I've taken away from him so far. It's just like no limitations. Don't let any doubt creep into the work that you're doing.
Right.
The healing that's being done. And he said that we've had enough hard processes now in life. We don't need any more hard processes. So even when we're thinking about working with these master plants and psychedelics, we don't have to blow the gates open. We can take micro doses. And he lets people microdose the ayahuasca during the ceremony as well, or just sit in during the ceremony and just be in the energy of the plant spirit that's being worked with and called in. And I love that, because I'm there. I definitely don't need hard processes anymore. So just gentle, beautiful, ongoing kind of teachings. And it's one of those, medicines that will keep operating over time. So just take it once, and then things are going to be unveiled more and more over time. So there's no need to keep doing it over and over and close together,
Right. And I feel like at that point, it's almost feels more like recreational, like the way people do other things.
Yes. That, or like so uncomfortable with the physical plane that I'd rather just keep kind of blasting into that spiritual, disembodied kind of spiritual place. And I totally get that, because I feel like it took me well into adulthood to fully incarnate here, because there was some part of me that's like, I don't want in the body. I don't want to be stuck in the body.
Yeah.
And so I get that. But now working with nature and the plants and their essences and being around the trees, you're in the country, I'm in the forest, and then working with an Andean medicine man, a people who've never lost their connection to nature and its essence and its spirit, and calling on their mountains and their rivers and the 4 elements, the 4 directions, their sacred plants and animals as guides and as messengers. I feel really, really rooted for the first time, maybe since childhood. And that to me feels like a completion, where I started out with Kriya Yoga, this high kind of mystical path and experience. And now I'm here rooted down deep into the earth. And something about that just feels whole and complete now. Right.
I think about this often as, we are born in the 3rd dimension for a reason, and if we were meant to be out in the cosmos, like that's where we would be. And I think it's important to get those glimpses to remember, okay, we can expand or we can go within or whatever, but also to just love the life that you're actually living. I think many of us, it's a weird time to be on the planet, honestly. I get dissociating. I get like not wanting to experience like your cubicle job or whatever. And I think that's what it is. It's like we're just so bored here. We're just so that we would rather daydream.
Yeah.
You know, and I get that. I'm like very good at daydreaming. But I was like you, like over time, I'm like, I kind of want to be here.
Yeah.
You know, I want to be in my body. So as much as like I can astral project and do all that, I kind of rather do that at nighttime now.
Right.
And in the daytime, just be very much here. And plants have helped me so much. And trees, specifically trees, have helped show me so much about being rooted and just present and stable.
Yeah.
You know, and I have known a few people, I feel like they lost touch and they almost became more like schizophrenic because they just, they're so far out now, you know, and it's like, I don't even know who they are anymore. I don't know what they do. And so I feel like there's that, if you're doing it through that nature, you know, and that's where I don't think like some of these chemical things are the way to do it, right? I think they're somehow detaching people from the physical, where the plant medicine is bringing them back in.
Yes.
So I feel like that's where with like LSD and stuff, it's a synthesized man-made thing. And that's probably why I'm scared of plant medicine, because I've done the man-made stuff, and it's jarring, and it is jarring. It can, if you're already, you know, I feel like a little dissociated, that's going to pull you straight out. I feel like it's harder to ground after, but I think doing it with someone that is from the culture where they are so grounded that they can guide. I think it's so important to have a guide.
Yeah, I agree. So
that you can understand, you know, the whole process of it, and like what am I seeing? What might I experience? What, you know? So I love the way that you did it, and I think that that's probably the best way to work with some of these plants that aren't necessarily native to our area. So we need the people that have been, you know, experimenting and working with them for centuries and however long, because they know the plant.
Right.
So
yeah, they're masters of it, and they understand it in ways that it would be even hard for us to conceive, and it is a being to them. And there are other forces, you know, in their cosmovision. Some forces aren't always, you know, benevolent, and so that's why they're very, very careful in how they open ceremonies, and, you know, the Icaros that they'll sing, the medicine songs during the ceremony, they're the whole time are aware of the energies that are, you know, coming and moving, and they're guiding that process really heavily and putting up a lot of protection for you know, for those who are there experiencing. And then even to be sent back out with just that experience isn't enough. It has to be rooted like in some kind of understanding of life, and what is life, and what is my life, and how to live it, you know. Out of this tradition, it's really beautiful because it seems to be centered from one of their main laws is Aini, which is sacred reciprocity. And so they keep this really beautiful, harmonious relationship with life and with the planet, and therefore within themselves, their families, their communities. So they're constantly aware of the giving and receiving, and keeping that balanced and harmonious. And, you know, just that practice alone would ground someone, you know, who's having, you know, these master plant kind of experiences.
Right. I really love that, even though we don't have a lot of that wisdom here anymore, that there's so many people that are traveling and having these experiences and these initiations, and then they're bringing that back and kind of becoming, you know, a shaman in their own right for the people in their little town or their little community, because we need this wisdom, you know? So there was a point where I felt like, you know, people talk about cultural appropriation and all this, and I'm like, I don't think that studying with that culture and bringing the wisdom back is cultural appropriation. I think you're celebrating and you're honoring that they have this wisdom and we have lost it, and we need to restore it or we will destroy the planet. So it's not like, I don't think they want to hoard the wisdom. I think they know that it needs to be passed down in a certain way. So it's not like, oh, I'm going to get online and research this for 2 hours and now I'm a shaman, you know. It's so sacred. And I feel like it's, I don't know, like I see all these people sort of making fun of people that, oh, I'm in a medicine ceremony. But I'm like, yeah, sure, there might be a few people doing that. But I think it's important to bring the wisdom back.
Yeah. And actually, by bringing it back and sharing it, it's a way to deeply honor their tradition, because,
Right.
Puma did talk about for so long in their tradition it was held within, but it's so clear to them that it's now time to share it. And his hope is, his dream is global, how to build a global community that remembers the sacredness of life. And that lives in that sacred balance and that sacred harmony, so that we create this energetic web that rebalances everything really quickly.
Right.
And he has this saying, it's like, well, we're all indigenous to the earth.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't have any, like, that cultural appropriation, because people have brought that up to him, and he's like, well, we're all one. We're one human family.
Right.
On one earth. So it's all shared.
Right. Exactly. That's the way it needs to be. We have to put race aside and say we are the human race.
Yeah.
And, everyone has the cultures that they're brought up in, but that doesn't mean that they can't grow and learn from other cultures.
As we have always done, even just trading spices, a spice route, and then that starts to create philosophies and religions. Like, we've always cross-pollinated each other.
Right. So I guess it almost hurt me to see people trying to say, well, you're not allowed to study this. You can't do yoga if you're not from India or so, and I'm like, I just don't know. I mean, especially if they're teaching it to you. I don't think that that's a bad thing. It almost seems disharmonious to create an atmosphere around it to where you feel like, okay, I'm a white Southern girl, I'm not allowed to do yoga. You know what I mean? I feel like that still feels worse.
That's a lot of labels, a lot of division.
Right, and I don't feel like that it's meant to be like that.
And it doesn't do honor to the masters who brought it to the West. Yogananda was told by Yukteswarji specifically that you would bring it to the West. Much to his dismay, because he was so in love with India, because everywhere you look, there's a shrine, there's a saint, there's a mystic. They're just like in love with the spiritual life.
Right.
And he came to the West, and he was just like, oh my gosh, so disoriented with all the materialism.
Just concrete buildings everywhere.
So, it was a sacrifice for him to bring yoga to the West. And so by studying it and practicing it and sharing it, I think we honor him and the tradition.
Yes. And I think that there's a reason why, there's this return back to the sacred kind of ways. We're all almost yearning for it, but some of us don't even have the vocabulary or the knowledge to know what we're yearning for, but we're depressed. And this isn't working, and all the smog and the gray buildings are starting to get to us, and so I'm very appreciative of the people who have brought this wisdom, and I think that's why I loved studying theosophy and things so much, because it connected all these different cultures, like a corroboration of it all, and it was a great intro. And then it would make me want to study the culture separate, on its own. And I'm like, well, this is really cool. Now I want to look into this. And there was a point where we couldn't share that way, but now it's it's a lot easier. And I don't know. I hope that anyone that feels called to explore these other cultures doesn't let somebody on the internet make them feel as though they can't because they're, from East Tennessee or whatever. That if you feel called to explore it, there's a reason. That's like a soul yearning thing.
Yes, always. What is it? Joseph Campbell, follow your bliss.
Yes. Love him. What are some of the things that you can share about the mysteries of the Sacred Portals of Peru?
So being guided through these sacred portals, these sacred places of Peru, like Machu Picchu, from wisdom keepers, was profoundly humbling and enlightening. They understand them on a way that you're not going to get from a historian or the plaques they kind of put up around the places. They are living entities and beings and spirits. They were portals brought by ancient civilizations, even pre-Incan, and left there by the Lemurian, the Atlanteans, as a way to program in information that could always be accessed. Puma and his line were taught how to access these sacred sites. And so on our way to Machu Picchu, we stopped at this ancient astrological observatory, Alote-Tambo. I'm still struggling a little bit with their language and their words, but I remember sitting there, and there was a stream. I was just meditating by a stream there, and all of a sudden it's like the water starts speaking to me and telling me, giving me information. And I remember going to Puma, and he likes to set a theme for the day when we're traveling, and the theme for that day is like, nothing's ever lost, it's just missing. And I remember just like after that stream, sitting by the stream, and it just speaking to me, giving me this information, kind of like cosmic origin information. I went to Puma and I was like, I don't think that it's, nothing's ever lost, it's only missing. I think nothing is ever lost, it's only hidden. And he's like, oh yeah, I forgot to tell you. I love him. He's so delightful and excited about it all. He's like, I forgot to tell you that they foresaw the Spanish invasion, and so they started burying all their temples and all the information. He said, so it's all here. It's just kind of buried and underground, and just now really starting to re-emerge.
Wow.
And so that's one of those, just kind of like being at this ancient astrological observatory, and just how that they knew how to program water in the space, so it's all can just be tapped into. And then when we were ending our trip, we stopped on one last portal, a Lemurian portal, and there's a certain way to kind of stand in it, and put your head to the stone and your hands, that he said it's going to share something with you, really, really powerful. And he said it's just for you. But I was so delighted when I got the message. It's like, there's no way this is just for me, because if it makes me this happy, it's like everyone deserves to have this kind of knowledge. And so what it was saying, during this, we're just coming out of a lot of uncertain times, and there's a lot of big forces at play in our world. And the message was like, there's this realm was created from these cosmic beings. They create it, they keep it, they know and see everything, and they guard it, and they will always guard it and protect it. And so like, oh my gosh, like what a relief to think, how do I save the world? How do I save the people? How do I save the planet? Like all that washed away. We each have our part, and I have my part, and I know what that is. But there's way bigger forces, cosmic forces, that have it in balance. They have it. And that was like, oh my gosh, such a relief. It made me feel so happy.
Right, and it takes so much fear.
So much fear away.
Right, it's interesting you said you put your hand on the rock or head on the rock, because I had this journey with sound one time, and there was a handprint on a rock, and I put my hand on it, and then received this vision from the elemental realm. And they were talking about the sun, and they were like, the sun's a portal, don't block out the sun, please stop blocking. I was like, why are they telling me this? And then I'm like studying the stuff, and they're like, yeah, global warming, they're trying to block out the sun. And I was like, oh my gosh. But it was a little, like, made me a little afraid for a minute. But just you saying, like, we're protected, like, these forces know what's going on. And I think people can try to do what they want to do.
Right.
But there are very powerful beings out there that will take care of the earth in one way or another. Yes. So it's like, we can try to manipulate things. We can try to, mess with nature, but at some point, like, it takes care of its own. Yeah. So I'm like, that made me feel more safe.
Good.
In that way, So I think we really are protected all the time. And sometimes I wonder, I'm like, why did no one see this? Or why is no one connecting or whatever? And I'll receive guidance that it's like, well, it's because you're protected. And so they can't see you because like only certain people are going to be able to, like, even with my podcast, there's certain episodes and I'm like, how did this one not take off? And it's like, well, there was something really potent in that one. Not everybody was ready for it.
Yeah.
And so, if I didn't receive that guidance, I might be like, well, what have I done wrong? And it's like, well, it's not that you did anything wrong. It's that, some wisdom is more protected than others because it's so expansive that if the wrong person gets it and they're not ready for it,
Right.
So I'm like, okay, well, that's a good way to look at it. So, yeah, I love that with the portal stuff. I was just talking to you about discovering that in East Tennessee, that there was a portal here that the Cherokee were guardians of. And I was just like blown away, when I was learning about that and connecting the fact that the lab was put on top of it and things like that. But always feeling kind of more disconnected from being from this area when I was a little kid because I'm just seeing the concrete buildings. It doesn't feel necessarily sacred. And then to discover that it's very sacred land and that it feels like purposeful that I would incarnate here at this time. And so that's so cool to just think about that there are these energy centers all over the earth.
Right.
And that when we stand or sit in them, like we can connect to something way beyond just the average everyday kind of thing. So,
and it's interesting how it's coming up in mass consciousness too, all these ancient civilizations, these sacred sites, and this new insights that we're having and new discoveries we're having about them. It's almost like the portals themselves are reawakening to balance out the planet.
Right, because we need it now. We need it. So that's beautiful. Can we explore a bit into your year-long immersion into the Andean Cosmovision, healing practices, and ceremonial services?
So that's the work I'm doing with Puma, and it's a year-long program guiding me through their cosmovision, their understanding of life, where we came from, why we're here, where we're going, and then working with all of the natural elements, the natural world. They are masters of the living energy that moves through all things, and they have ways of working with the elements. They have what they call their mesa, which is an altar, and the way they program that altar with different stones and directions and elements, essences, and so they can use that then as a way to heal people. And then, of course, they have the plant spirit medicines that they use as well. And so it's just this journey into their world where everything is alive, which I think we're just coming back to that. Nature is sacred. Everything is living and vibrating, and just kind of how to start to experience that again. It's almost like practicing in a way that starts to soften the veil of duality or something and helps me merge back in. I remember my Kriya Yoga teacher saying this a lot. You're not apart from nature. You are a part of nature. And that's great conceptually. And it's like, yeah, that sounds great. But something about working with people who've never separated themselves from nature, I'm starting to feel that and sense that. I could taste that and smell. Like I'm starting to merge back into nature.
Right. And we're like all channels of that nature.
And then, Puma is very much about, well, now with having, these rituals for healing, for awakening, then how do I take that into my family? How do I take that into my community? And how do I take that into humanity as a whole, doing just my small part of reintegrating and then sharing that around me.
Right, which I guess that is, it's kind of hard to know sometimes, but it's almost like you don't always know exactly how you're going to play your part, but as long as you are, you know, walking on the path, if you're in motion and you're in the flow, then like the guidance comes, the material things appear, you know, it's like you just can't stagnate.
Right.
So as long as you continue to dance,
Right.
then everything starts to make sense. And you're like, oh, I am playing my part just by, you know, going out into the world today and like doing my thing. And then I like met this person or, you know, smelled this flower. And it's like, it's all like, there's guides everywhere.
Yeah.
And it's like we just have to continue to flow. But just to know that we're always doing our part just by being here.
Right.
You know, and I think that's something I learned with the Akashic Records is, you know, my first time I'm like, what is my purpose? And they're like, well, just to be here. Like your energy here is like helping everybody. Now, I guess I always thought like there was this thing I was supposed to do. And I mean, there's probably plenty of things I'm going to be doing, but they were like, really just you existing and like shining your light and smiling at strangers and stuff. Like you're doing it.
Yes.
So I'm like, oh, I don't have to, you know, create this like thing, you know, this tangible thing. And they're like, well, yeah, you'll create lots of things. And they're like, anything. And I'm like, okay. But it's like this riddle or something. And we want to, I don't know. I feel like we want to create something very specific, but it's almost like detaching from that and just allowing it to unfold is actually like there's no resistance if we do it that way.
Yeah. And I think that's just that paradigm we're still trying to, the conditioning and trying to come out of as I think we're trained to produce something very specific and instead of just to be who we are. And I love that you said, you know, and dance, just keep dancing. And that was one of our teachings recently, the Puma. He's like, you know, as you start to work with these forces, you're going to see that sometimes during these integration phases, it can feel like a lot of tension or a lot of, you know, fighting or battling or just not in the flow. And he's like, so you got a choice, you know, you could fight it out or you can just dance through it. And they're just a culture of singing and dancing and laughing and playing and celebrating. And they're just like the happiest people I've ever seen because they just choose to dance through life and dance through it all.
Right. And our body is a part of nature. I think when we move it, you know, that's a sacred experience. And I was just talking to my husband the other day, and I think one of the saddest things about my childhood is that I wasn't able to dance. Like I wanted to do ballet, I wanted to be a gymnast. Well, I wasn't allowed to do that. And no one in my family ever danced. And then as I got older, and I'm like, okay, well, I'm an adult now. Is it silly to start, you know? And I was like, no. And I just start dancing, and it's like this, there's like this grief, but then there's this opening, and it's like so much is going on. But I want my children to know that dance is a sacred right in a way. And so we'll turn music on, and all of us will just dance, and I want them to feel comfortable in their body, you know? And I'm like, man, if I could have just danced as a kid, if I didn't feel so weird because no one else was dancing, you know, so I don't want to dance if like everyone's just sitting there with their TV, you know, it's like, that'd be weird. So I don't know. I feel like that's like a goal of mine as a parent is like allow them to do all the physical things that they feel called to do, because I think it keeps us open, you know, and that we receive information when we're dancing sometimes.
Absolutely. Because it's moving the energy, all that stuck stagnant energy out of us. It's clearing our channels. Yes. There's I'm sure you've heard of it too. I don't know where I got this from, but I guess when a person came to the healer, it's just like the questions they were asked is, when did you stop singing? When did you stop laughing? When did you stop dancing? And I really think it's probably that simple. You know, and that's the work I want to do with others, because I do, like, I'm happy in my, you know, forest in the Smoky Mountains, talking to the trees, and learning each personality and essence of the plants that arise there. A lot of native medicinal plants, like mind-blowing the amount. Each year I see a new one, and I can't tell if it's always been there or if it just showed up because that's what I need, the medicine I need. It's really trippy that way. And I'm really happy, just it's kind of like that forest mystic or that forest dweller part of my life. But then I look out and I see the struggle, and I do work at a spa and salon, and there's like 75 of us, and it's often young people come into it, and the level of anxiety that I'm observing, I've never seen that before. And it seems to be, I think Jordan Peterson said this recently. He's a controversial figure, but he's a brilliant psychologist. What is kind of this anxiety? And he defined it as just lost, no sense of direction. And I see that, but I also see the food. I'm like, well, it's breaking down the body's intelligence. So there again, there's just the intelligence of the body is not flowing, so they're not getting the information or the feedback they need to make the best decisions for themselves. And we're in this weird time where our culture has collapsed, and we're trying to figure out what it's going to be. And there's a lot of forces at play in that drama, and so they don't have the same kind of compasses that I had growing up, and probably you had growing up. And so that's where I'm at. Like, it's important for me to come out of my sanctuary and say, well, how can I help you? How can I help you get oriented? And a lot of it's just bringing them back to the forest, and into nature, and let's play in the river. Let's take a walk through the forest. And something about being in that field of balanced energy, connected, to the frequency of the earth and the trees again, everything in the body and mind starts lining back up.
Right.
And it's like the anxiety slips away. And so, sometimes maybe the problem's as simple as, being in the city with all the EMFs, changing the frequency so that we can't hear the heartbeat of the earth anymore, disorients us.
Right.
So, that's where kind of like all this Kriya Yoga, this illuminated herbalism, which is working with plants on that deep, deep level to the spiritual level of plant work, where we're understanding its energetics and its qualities and properties, and we're understanding the systems of our body and their energetics and qualities and properties so deeply, and that we form that relationship with that essence, that plant, or that medicine, because I believe healing happens in relationships. And by taking that in a way, it allows us to heal and to also be illuminated. So there's working on that level with the plants, but there's that. And then with the Cosmovision with Puma, it's just really, to me, it really reawakens the wisdom child in me. So that joyfulness of just exploring under rocks or climbing trees or smelling flowers. But, now I'm in a place where it's with full wisdom. So, a whole nother dimension opens up when those two are combined.
Right.
And that's really what I want to offer to others, bring them back into that wisdom child where life is a joy again, we're happy again, we're dancing, we're laughing, we're singing again, and our food feeds us again and nourishes us again. And yeah, for sure. I've noticed during this Cancer season, it's been heavy emotions, and then there was a point where I was sitting with it, I'm like, well, Cancer's a water sign, it's initiating, it's cardinal, and I noticed that the days I went to the river and submerged myself, I didn't cry those days. I just felt so good. But the days that I wasn't around water, I just couldn't handle it. It was like I was having these crazy emotional outbursts, and it just felt, it was, I don't know, it was intense, to say the least. But I felt like there was something about just studying like that astrological sign and saying, okay, well, we're in a water sign right now. Right.
Like, I should be around and near water. I should be in the water, And I would come home and I just felt like so calm on the, you know, and I'm like, I don't feel mental at all right now. But the days where I just couldn't, and I was like really in my head and in my mind, I just felt like I lost some connection to the phase that I'm in or whatever, and it was so hard to ground it, and I just became teary, like.
So the water started coming from the inside then. Like
Right.
it still wanted to flow.
Exactly. So it was like it's going to come out one way or the other, but if you just go in the water and play and have fun, then you're going to be able to process it.
Right.
And it's like that water's going to hold you. And then I feel like when we're in water, we're receiving all sorts of information, like the elementals in that area, and there's just wisdom there. But it helps us, I think, transmute things that I wasn't aware of it until this Cancer season, which was so heavy for me. But yeah, all of the elements have things to offer us, and they're like holding space for us. And if we just can learn to feel into it, like, what do I need right now? Well, it's hot outside, so I probably need water, That's probably the element that'll take care of me the most right now. But like, it's that return to nature really is healing, And I think I've talked about it a little bit on the show. I dabbled in almost feeling agnostic for a while in my early 20s. I just was like, religion felt really toxic for me and things. And what snapped me out of it was transcendentalism and studying the transcendentalist writers, which is all about the return to nature and that wonder of childhood. So like Wordsworth and Emerson and Thoreau and all these people. And even though they're not necessarily spiritual leaders, they're just like focusing on nature poetry. It saved me, and I'm like, okay, there's something here, and that's what I'm missing. And I was missing nature. I was missing that connection because it was never taught to me. It was never passed down. Like you're saying, these other people never lost it. Well, we never necessarily got it.
Right.
We have moments where we're kids out in nature where we felt something, but there was no words, and no one was like telling us, well, this is a sacred experience.
It's living and it's breathing and it's
yeah, and it's right there. And I think we are slowly returning to it, becoming more aware, and like the need to sort of take care of nature and protect it and love it and allow it to restore us, in that way. So let's talk a little bit about your vision to create the Nature Spirit Medicine Forest Sanctuary for healing and awakening here in the Smoky Mountains.
Yeah, so I'll live on 8.5 acres in the Smoky Mountains, and it has water that falls all along the length of the property. It has a lot of the turkey, the deer, the bear, crows, and pileated woodpeckers. It's just mind-blowing, the level of just life that's there. I didn't realize moving out of the city, I had some sense of it, but how just deprived I was of all these other living beings that really are meant to be part of this ecosystem. Kind of how barren the land I was living on in the city, even though I'd always try to plant gardens and try to bring some life to it. And then there's a lot of just native medicinals there as well. And so me being a lover of plants, plant medicines, it's like a heaven for me. And the vision I have for it is to, we have trails that go through it. And then there's places to build like a platform by the water. And so I want to be able to have people come and just immerse themselves in nature, and then, guided meditations, some breath work, learning the plants that are there, their spirits, working with the 4 elements, just really guiding and teaching and healing and awakening in that space with others, and helping them integrate back into the natural world.
Right. So kind of like a retreat.
Yeah, and so I'm back in a hollow, and there's a ridge between me and the neighbor, and we're the only 2 back there, but they Airbnb their place, so it would be ideal, if I want to have a retreat.
Right.
People stay there, just walk over, and then we'll do our practices together on the forest sanctuary.
That sounds beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. So let's talk a little bit about what a consultation with you is like. What are some ways that you work and guide people?
Mm-hmm. So at first, it's just establishing where they are, get a little bit oriented where they are with their body and their physical health, where they are mentally, emotionally, their psychological well-being, and then where they are spiritually. So it's just some questions to start to figure out where that is and where it could use refinement, so that those three bodies can come into alignment with one another and they can feel that sense of wholeness, completeness, which is really just like a happiness,
Right.
Again, and to feel healthy and well. And then also working to form a life path. I was taught very early on, you're kind of like this boat in this ocean, and you're just going, and you're going to end up where you end up, just like that, with no particular coordinates. And my guru liked to joke a lot. He's like, so, I guess you can just hope that you have good karma and you're going to like where you end up, or, but do you really want to test that? And he's like, you need an aim, you need a North Star, a pole star. And so I chose that for myself. And he's like, you want to choose something an aim that you would want from lifetime to lifetime to lifetime. Because things like wealth, that's nice, but the next lifetime we might come in and have a ton of wealth, but we're missing love,
Right.
So he's like, pick something really that you're going to want lifetime to lifetime. And I did that for myself. And so I want to help others find their orientation to who are they, why are they here, and where are they going. So they can start to get some direction. And as we'll name something, oh, this is my aim. And as we start walking, then it's like, oh, well, this path, maybe, this looks more like my aim. And it refines over time, but just starting with some really strong sense of direction and purpose.
Right. Right.
But that's what initial consultation would look like. And from that, it's going to be very, 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 very individual, the work. Some people, it's just like, this month, can we stay hydrated?
Right.
Can we find a really clean source of water, living water, ideally spring water? And can we give ourselves enough water element? And I like looking through the lens of elements when kind of trying to figure out where people are. Where's their earth element, their physical body, their groundedness, their stability, or where's their fire, their digestion, their passion, or where's the air element, and their sense of balance and beauty and well-being too, and love and things like that. Their lungs, their breath, their expansiveness. So from there it just gets really, really custom how they want to start walking that path.
I love that. Sounds beautiful. So what is the best way for our listeners to support your work and connect with you?
I think you said something about putting my social media, like the Facebook link and the Instagram link.
Okay.
That would be a good start to just, if they wanted to make contact. Also, I do work at the Natural Alternative Salon and Spa, and so there's always if they would like to make a consultation appointment with me, I guess going on the website there would be the best start, or, messaging me through my social media site. I am working on more of a web page and getting together classes, both locally and then just maybe a once a month kind of Instagram kind of video or something where I'm just sharing freely as well too. So there's lots of different access points and ways to work with me for whatever works for the person.
Right. I'll make sure to add those links in the description for everybody. All right. Well, we are wrapping up. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming out and making this episode with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
And thank you all for tuning in. Check us out next time on the Astral Hour.